Hey everyone and welcome back. Today we are checking out My Generation by The Who. I don't really need to say anything else about this song. I think you all know what you're getting yourselves into. Anyway, as always, this is a Patreon requested lesson, so if you like the video and want to get involved in the channel and vote on my next lesson, please click the link below to my Patreon page. And with that in mind, let's get straight into it.
We get around. Expect to look awful. Hope I die before I get old. My generation, says my generation. Why don't you all fade away?
So before we begin, let me just run you through the sound. So today I'm using a Gibson Les Paul. This is a 2019 60 spec one in unburst, and I'm going to be using it on the bridge pickup. I'm going to be using my usual combination of overdrive, which is a DoD looking glass combined with an exotic super sweet boost pedal. And for the overdrive, I've got that set to about 12 o'clock on the high gain setting. I'm also going to be boosting the bass and treble to about 3 o'clock on each. Other than that, I'm just going to use a little bit of reverb from the amp. Alright then, let's jump straight in and have a look at the main riff for My Generation. This is going to cover the introduction, the verse, and also the chorus. There's going to be minimum technique here and a maximum attitude. You don't have to be the greatest guitar player in the world for this to sound absolutely brilliant. Anyway, it's just going to sound like this. And we are going to be starting with a G power chord. For that we are going to need the third of the low E, then muted A string, open D, open G, and then ring and pinky finger on the third of the B and E. It's going to be a nice and strong start, all downstrokes here. And then we're going to fit in one upstroke before changing the bass note down from the third of the low E down to the first fret there, so 2 fret gap. And personally, I like to use my thumb to play the first of the low E. You might prefer to use your index finger, but just personal preference, I think that's a bit more comfortable, and I think the change is a bit quicker between the two there as well. And when we change the bass note down to that first of the E, the rhythm is going to be exactly the same, all downstrokes with one upstroke before changing back to the third fret. And that's all there is to it for the main riff. Let me just play it again. And a bit quicker. Moving into the verse, we're going to play the exact same riff, but this time we're going to have some pauses in between it. And the pauses are going to last for 2 bars, which is going to be counted as 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. And with some string rakes, that would just sound like this. So on and so forth there. Anyway, at a gig, obviously, you won't be doing the string rakes just like that to keep time. But if you wanted to do some string rakes, sometimes I quite like to do the rhythm of the clapping in the verses with string rakes. Check this out. So that might be a nice idea to throw in there, or you could just have silence in between those as well, whatever you want to do. Anyway, let's move on and talk about the chorus. We're going to be anchored down on a G chord here, and it's just going to sound like this. And for that, we are going to be playing the third of the E, second of the A, and then open D. And after we've played that, we're then going to play the open G and open B together. And if you want, that could be a downstroke and then upstroke. We're then going to do that again, but this time we're going to throw in our index finger onto the first of the B. Then we're going to do the same thing again, but this time it's going to be the third of the B with our pinky finger. We're then going to go back to the first of the B. And then we're going to repeat it a second time. And to finish that, we'll go back to the G5 chord for the next verse. Anyway, once again, it just goes like this. Altogether, so far with the example, it sounds like this.
Try to put us down just because we get around. Expect to look awful. Hope I die before I get old. Don't you all fail? Don't I dig what we all say? Try to cause a big sensation. Just talking about my generation. My generation. My generation.
We're now going to jump straight in and have a look at the guitar solo, and this is going to be my practical interpretation of the solo. It's not necessarily going to be exactly 100% accurate to the record, but it will be very, very similar, and it's going to hit all the sort of right story beats, if you like. If nothing else, it's going to act as a great reference point for you to sort of fiddle around with, and if you want to, you could just improvise over the entire thing anyway. Let's start by having a look at the example first, and then I'll break it down. Check this out. So we are going to be playing alongside the bass solo, and phrase number 1 is just going to sound like this. Simply starting on the third of the G, and we're just going to let that note ring out. Sometimes when I play it, I quite like to hit the A and D string as well and just mute those. And if you want to be really crazy, you could start by sliding in from the low E string. Anyway, after that, we are going to move over to the 5th of the D. Then we're going to play the 3rd, hammering on to the 5th, then pulling it off. Moving over to the 5th of the A. Then climbing back up, 3rd of the D, over to the 5th. So together, that's... and a bit quicker. We're then going to go back into the bass solo, and then we're going to come back in with phrase number 2, which is just going to sound like this. So we're going to be doing some double stops here. We're going to be based around the 4th and 5th frets, and that's going to be 4th of the G with our index finger and then middle finger on the 5th of the D, and that's going to be anchored in place there. We're going to start by playing this 3 times. We're then going to add in our ring finger, and that's going to come in at the 5th of the G, and we're going to play that twice. Then we're going to stretch out our pinky finger and play the 7th of the G, still keeping our middle finger anchored in there on the 5th of the D, and we're going to play that 3 times. We're then going to go backwards, 5th of the G and D together once, then back to our original starting point also once. So together that's and a bit quicker. From here we're going to go back into the bass solo, and then we're going to come back in with phrase number 3, which is going to be nice, short and sweet. So for that we are going to be at the 5th of the G and B together. We're going to play that, bend it up, then we're going to play it unbent. Moving over to the 3rd of the G and B, and I'm just going to bar that with my index finger. And then we're going to move over to the 5th of the D, and I like to use my middle finger for that. We're then going to repeat the first part. And together. We're then going to go back into the final bit of bass solo, and then we're going to come back in with phrase number 4, which is just going to sound like this. And for that we are going to be starting on the high E string, 6th fret, and we're going to slide up to the 8th. We're then going to play the 6th of the E, moving over to the 8th of the B. From here we're going to do a very quick jump over to the 5th of the G, and we're going to play that 3 times, bending them up on each. On the 3rd and final one we're going to bring it down and pull it off to the 3rd fret. And land at the 5th of the D. And we're then going to pull that off to the 3rd and hammer it back onto the 5th. So together that's and from the start of that phrase. From here we're going to do a very quick ascending run. We're going to start on the 3rd of the D, hammering onto the 5th. Playing the 3rd of the G. We're then going to play the 5th of the G, bending it up, and then using our index finger to do the 3rd of the high E. So we've got a very small string jump there. From here we're going to go back to the 5th of the G, playing it, bending it up and then down, and then we're going to land at the 3rd of the G. And to finish phrase number 4, we're going to go back to the 5th of the G, playing it, bending it up, then go back to the 3rd of the high E, so that mini string jump again. Then going back to the 5th of the G, playing it, bending it up, then down, pulling it off to the 3rd this time. Then we're going to move over to the 5th of the D, sliding up to the 7th. And again. All together, phrase number 4. So immediately as we come out of the back of the guitar solo, the whole song is going to undertake a key change. Everything is going to be shifted up a whole tone, or the equivalent of a musical letter. Now for us, that means that G riff we were playing is now going to become an A riff, and it's just going to sound like this. So for that, I was just playing an A major chord there, using my index finger to bar the 2nd fret. I had the open A and then 2nd of the D, G and B together. The next thing I did is to bring over my middle finger to the 3rd of the low E, naturally muting the A string at the same time, and that's going to be our descending bass note there. And together they just sound like this. It's the exact same rhythm. Now from here we're going to move into the next chorus, and this is going to be almost identical to the one we did in G. Let me just remind you of how that one went. But now we're going to shift that riff into the A shape, which is going to look like this. So now for our little riff on the B string, we need to use our middle finger coming into the 3rd of the B, then pinky finger stretching all the way out to the 5th, and then we'll go backwards to the 3rd and then off again. So we've got something which sounds like this. I'll just play it a bit slower. Anyway, we're going to play that round 4 times, and at that point the song is going to undergo another key change. This time we're going to move it up a semitone, or the equivalent of just 1 fret, and we've got a really awkward change to make. We need to go from this A chord here all the way over to a B flat power chord at the 6th of the E, and that's the 6th of the E and 8th of the A, 8th of the D. And from here the riff is going to go from a power chord at the 6th fret to the 4th and back up again. It's going to be the exact same rhythm, and it just sounds like this. And from there we're going to move into the very last chorus, which is going to be exactly the same as the one we did in A, but this time we're going to shift it up 1 fret to the 3rd fret now. And we need to make a point out of not playing the open E string or open A string. Those notes will really clang with this particular part. We need to make sure we're focusing on the D, G and B strings, and then our middle and pinky fingers are going to come on the 6th and 8th frets. It should just sound like this. Let's have a look at the example again, and then we're going to move on into the outro.
Why don't you all fade away? Try to we all succeed. Try to cause a big sensation. Just talking about my generation. because we get around. We do look awful. I die before I get old.
So we've now arrived at the outro, and this is a really nice and easy one. We've just got two chords to play here. We've got a C major going to a B flat and then back and forth again and again and again. I've also seen this be played as C major going to G and then C, but it's really up to you at this point. You can kind of get a little bit creative with it. It's a really, really simple part. Rhythmically, it just goes a little bit like this. But like I say, you could also do it as C to G. I was in a band once where we did it from C to G and we played it a little bit like this. The rhythm was slightly different. Both work quite nicely with the drums going mad, but just talk to your other bandmates and see what you think. I'll just play the example one more time. So that concludes my lesson on My Generation by The Who. Hopefully you got on with the lesson okay. It's an absolute classic for function bands and pub bands, so hopefully you can add this song into your set list. I'm going to leave you now with the full backing track so you can play along with it. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next lesson.
Try to put us down because we get around. They do look awful. Hope I die before I get old. My generation, says my generation. Why don't you all fail? Don't try to dig what we all say. Big sensation. Just talking about my generation. My generation. We all succeed. Try to cause a big sensation. Just talking about my generation. Because we get around. We do look awful. I die before I get old.